From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
State of the Union, State of the State, and State of the Treasury. It didn't get as much attention, but General Treasurer Gina Raimondo just released a progress report on how her office is minding the state's bottom line. Everything from cracking down on bad checks to tracking unclaimed property, the health of the state treasury, plus the latest on pension reform, and a new poll that says the treasurer is the early frontrunner for governor. Our guest this week on Newsmakers, General Treasurer Gina Raimondo.
Good morning. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the panel, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi and Eyewitness News analyst Arlene Violet. Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Treasurer. It's really good to have you back on the program.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before we dive into the state of the Treasury, I want to talk about a story that Ted and I published last week. In Scituate, the pension board met there once in 12 years, and during that time, in their tiny police pension plan, we're talking about 33 members, they saw their unfunded liabilities shoot up to $8 million. What is your reaction to that specifically, and overall, what is your level of confidence in the people in charge of the 36 independent pension plans across the state?
Great question. Well, first of all, hats off to you for covering it, because as I've said for a long time, we have to deal with these issues, and the only way to deal with them is to get the facts and have realistic numbers and shine a light on the problem. So I think it's great you did that. I don't, as treasurer, I don't have jurisdiction over these municipal plans. Having said that, I'm as concerned as anyone. There is a concerning set of facts that you're hearing about in Scituate. And what I have tried to say over and over again is that when you sit on a pension board, you're a fiduciary. It's your job to check your political hat at the door and be a professional. And that means holding meetings, being educated. I've had lawyers and actuaries come in and actually train the state's retirement board, because at the end of the day, there's so many political pressures to take shortcuts, use unrealistic numbers. You can't do it. And that's what you're learning in Scituate and other places. If you make a shortcut or try to, make an easy choice and not use realistic numbers, someone's not going to get a pension. The well will run dry. It might take 10 years or 20 years, but it's just not the right thing to do as a fiduciary on a pension board.
We should point out the Scituate Police Pension Plan moved out of the state MERS in 1981 and went out on their own.
MERS, the state-run
the state-run pension plan for the municipalities. What is holding Rhode Island back from, we're a small state, from just flipping the switch and moving these independent plans under the state umbrella?
Great question. So as you point out, there is a state-run plan for municipalities, and my office administers that. And it's a healthy plan, and it was reformed. There are other plans outside of that. They could come into MERS, but every one of those plans has individually, collectively bargained for contracts. And my position is, you shouldn't break a contract with a statute, which means the right thing. There's no one-size-fits-all for every one of these contractual problems. So maybe they should come into MERS, but that can't be, legislated with the stroke of a pen.
It has to be worked out locally.
It has to be worked out locally. So today, front page of the paper, you see Johnston, the town of Johnston. Great credit to the mayor. He is working it out locally, working with his actuaries, putting a plan in place. Now he's going to have to get to the table with the firefighters and police on the other side and work it out. Same thing in Scituate. They're going to have to get to the table and work it out. But every one of the municipalities that came into the state system, they worked it out, at the table and kind of bargained as the parties decided together to come into the state system.
So it can't be forced. I want to ask you to turn to the state pension law. Obviously, there's litigation going on. I know there are rules about what you can say at this point because mediation has begun. But I have to say, I don't exactly understand how mediation even works with a law as opposed to a contract. If in mediation you and the other parties all decide on a different law, is that the law now, or doesn't the assembly has to pass it still? I mean, how does it even work?
Yeah. Well, you're right. So we are in a court-ordered mediation process, and I'm essentially under a gag order, court-ordered confidentiality, so I can't talk too much about it. But no, the General Assembly would have to pass a new law. Absolutely. You know, let's remember, you know, let's go back. There was a long process. You guys covered almost 40 hours of hearings. The General Assembly, by wide margins, passed a law, and that law is on the books and being implemented. Should that law either be deemed unconstitutional, or should the parties decide to agree on some changes, a new law would have to be passed. So that's our system of government.
But what if in mediation they say that we want to make these changes, and the General Assembly says, we don't feel like passing a new law? I mean, what then?
Then they don't pass a new law.
Separation
I mean, that's
of
basic
powers.
separation of powers. That's what I was going to say.
And then it goes back into the judiciary, and we start all over again.
That's exactly right.
Governor Chafee
Right.
took a little zing at you when he was here last month that you didn't want to sit down and talk. Do you deserve that zing?
No, absolutely not.
Because,
Yes.
because
From day one, I said, if there's a court-ordered mediation, my team and I will sit down and do the hard work, which is what we're doing now. What I objected to, and I still object to, was the governor's, private meetings with a couple of labor leaders behind closed doors before we were ordered to mediate. Enough of that.
isn't the judge out of line here? Separation of powers. She's judiciary. She can't order the legislature to make any changes. Is she wrong?
I don't believe so. I respect the judicial system. I respect this judge's court order, and we're working hard at mediation.
One other question about the state pension law. We have plenty of other things to talk about today. I talked to a lawyer who said he could easily see them throwing out the COLA suspension, but leaving in the rest of the plan, the hybrid plan and everything else. I know obviously you want the law to stay in full, but can it be taken apart in pieces? Could you see part of it being taken apart?
I don't believe that will happen because I believe it's constitutional in full, and I think the General Assembly did a fantastic job explaining why this was reasonable and necessary for the people of Rhode Island. Remember, this bill, the passage of this bill likely prevented bankruptcies of more than one municipality and saved the people of Rhode Island $4 billion over the next 20 years. So I think it is clear that it was reasonable and necessary. Having said that, yes, the way things work, a judge could say it's constitutional in part and unconstitutional in part, and then kick it back to the General Assembly. Back to Arlene's point, this is the way our government works. General Assembly makes a law, the judge will decide it's constitutional or not, and then kick it back to the Assembly. But also remember, this is going to take a long time. This will go to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. So the important thing for people listening, the law is in effect. We saved the pension system. If you're a public employee, the law is in effect and your pension is more secure than it was. If you're a taxpayer, the law is in effect and, your tax bill is affordable because of it.
Until the next General Assembly wants to change it, right?
It's a law.
So
Absolutely.
Can you, with all confidence, say you've saved the pension system?
I can say that with this law, but of course if it's tinkered with going forward, then
that's a problem.
That could be a problem.
You say reasonable and necessary. That is the big argument here. And there's a labor-backed bill at the State House calling for raising the income tax rate on families making over $250,000 from 5.99% to 7.99%. Do you support that or not?
I haven't looked specifically at that. Here's what I would say about tax policy. I think it's very dangerous to look in isolation at one piece of tax policy. The right question here is, we need to create economic opportunity for all Rhode Islanders, period, full stop. Highest unemployment rate in the country. Any discussion of taxes is level the playing field, equal opportunity, economic opportunity for Rhode Islanders. So the General Assembly, and I heard Speaker Fox say this, I think needs to pause and take the right approach, which is let's look at our entire tax structure and say, look at the corporate tax and the sales tax and the income tax and put together a package that together is fair but also encourages economic growth.
In your State of the Treasury, you say that, quote unquote, you're implementing a no-campaign donation acceptance policy for those actively bidding on Treasury contracts. I'm not sure I know what actively bidding means. So, January to March, there's a Treasury contract and investment company X bids on it. They don't bid between March and June. Would you accept a campaign contribution from them once that period is over, even though they could conceivably bid in August?
No, if it's an investment company. I do not take campaign contributions from any investment companies that do business with the pension
All right, how
fund.
about bidders on Treasury contracts then?
Lawyers and service providers, yes.
So if
But
they,
not during the period in which they are in an open RFP.
so between January and March, you wouldn't take it then, but whether they lost it or not, and they weren't bidding between March or
Yes.
April and June, you would
Yes.
take it.
Yes.
Well, doesn't that then set it up that better luck next time? I better give them money now because I want to come back in August. So how does that improve the ethical atmosphere?
It's a great question. You know, Treasury is not for sale, period, at any price. You know, I have, our office does an RFP, it's open. We have not given business to people that have made contributions, and, you know, there is no link between who contributes and who gets the business. There is no prohibition, campaign finance prohibition, against any statewide office holder, myself included, you know, taking money from folks that do business with the office. I impose this RFP rule on myself just because I think it adds a layer of trust, which is to say, during that period, I don't even want to consider taking any of these contributions. And as I said, asset managers, I have a bright line rule. I do not take any contributions from asset managers that do business with the state's pension fund.
Treasurer, the Massachusetts State Pension Plan did pretty well in calendar 2012. This is according to the Boston Globe. I'm getting these numbers. They added nearly $5 billion in assets. That's up 14%. How did we do? Do you know?
Well, I do know that our 10-year average is 6.6%, and our one-year fiscal average is about 1.4%. Here's what I would say. We're doing well. You have to focus on return and risk. And I am very focused on reducing the risk. You know, what I often say is, you don't want to ride the roller coaster. I don't want to ride the Six Flags roller coaster, which is all the way up and all the way down. I'm trying to create like the Storyland roller coaster. My kids love Storyland. You know, enjoy some of the up and not as much of the down. And so under my tenure, we have substantially reduced the risk and are performing against our benchmark. We are at or above our benchmark. So
fiscal is very different from calendar. We should point that out. And fiscal year was tougher on Wall Street, if I'm right. But is there any way that you're going to look at the calendar year numbers and go, yep, we're near Massachusetts and did around 14%? I mean, 1%, over 1%, that's a tough return.
Oh, there is that, and I can get back to you. I do know it's you should never look at 12 months a point in time. You know, for example, the 1.4%, which was June to June, if you added the next 2 months, that number was about 9%. It's just the up and the down, the up and the down. So that's why I said, you know, the 10-year number is about 6.5%. And especially in pension world, we have a long-term time horizon. So you want to look at, you know, 10, 15, 20-year numbers.
All right, we're going to take a break here on Newsmakers. And by the way, an apology to our viewers. They sound more like Barry White than Tim White hosting the program. I have a feeling I'm not alone out there. Our guest is General Treasurer Gina Raimondo. $800,000 in fraudulent checks were stopped. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my right, WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi, and we're also joined by Eyewitness News analyst Arlene Violet. Our guest this week is General Treasurer Gina Raimondo. Treasurer, going through your midterm report that we talked about at the top of the program, there was a really interesting line in there to me, and it read this: through measures of safeguard against fraud, Treasury stopped payment of nearly $800,000 in bad checks last year. What is that? That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, and you know, kudos to my staff, because we're constantly, like Arlene said, we're the watchdog for the people's money, and this is a great example where we stopped fraud. So, you know, unfortunately, people will try to cash fraudulent state checks.
Meaning they make up their own checks?
Exactly. So maybe it's a unemployment check or a Medicaid check or whatever. You know, the number of checks that are issued by state agencies, and my office clears all of those checks. So our staff put in place some new mechanisms to catch fraudulent checks, and then worked with our banks to make sure that these checks were found and stopped.
So the bank calls you guys, say, hey, was Ted Nesi supposed to get this check? Yes, he was, and so on and
yes,
so forth.
Yes, he was. No, he wasn't.
Cash that.
And then
what happens to those people? I mean, that's against the law, I assume. Do you hand their names over to the Attorney General's office?
Yes. So our job is to, stop payment and make sure the state doesn't lose money. In this case, $800,000. And then if there is anything that needs to be looked into, we refer it over to the Attorney General.
When will you decide whether to run for governor?
Sometime later this year.
This year is your time frame on it?
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to force you to have the same conversation you always do. I know you're thinking about it.
I am. Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, what would hold you back? We can understand why someone runs for governor.
Great
what would hold
question.
you back from doing so and decide, nope, I'm going to take a pass on the 2014 race? You look strong in the polls, obviously, so you can see why you might run.
Yes, I look strong in the polls. I've been overwhelmed with financial support from supporters. A lot of people are saying, go ahead and do it, which is humbling. I'm overwhelmed with that support. I'm a mother. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. I'm a daughter of parents who are in their 80s who I call every day and take care of. You really put yourself out there and put your family out there when you serve publicly, as I have. And so I need to work through to make sure this is the right thing for my family at this point in time.
Let me ask you another thing that relates to being governor. You're bringing in Bruce Katz. He's a Brookings Institution scholar. People at home might not know him, but if they watch Executive Suite, they do, because we were talking about he's an expert on.
Shameless.
He's an
You're
expert.
a bigger promoter than I am.
You got to be in this industry. He's an expert on urban economic development. Why are you bringing him in, and what do you want to find out from him?
Yeah, thank you. So obviously my first 2 years in office was all about let's fix the fundamentals. Fixing the pension was about creating a place where we could have businesses in Rhode Island. And we've done that. Fiscal stability will lead to economic growth. Now I'm spending even more time thinking about how do you create that economic opportunity. Just as a quick aside, I spent a couple of hours the other night on a telephone town hall for our financial literacy program, and you take phone call after phone call from Rhode Islanders saying, I can't pay my mortgage. I just lost my job. My wife lost her job. People need help today. They need a job. So Bruce Katz is a nationally known expert. I'm bringing him to town in February. I'm delighted he's coming. He's in hot demand. He's working now in Buffalo and Cleveland. He's been in Chicago. And he's going to spend a day or two here to start talking about ideas about how we can get some jobs going here. I think, as you know, Ted, I know you follow this closely, which I appreciate. His expertise is really figuring out what industry clusters can we be great at. So most of us, when I grew up, my dad worked, like so many people, in the jewelry industry. Well, his company closed, jobs went to China. I don't think the jewelry manufacturing industry is going to come back in Rhode Island. What's going to take its place? Is it healthcare? Is it financial services? So that's kind of what we want to talk to Bruce about.
So you obviously see yourself as a catalyst for economic development. You say so in your Treasury report. 2 projects of Governor Carcieri, 38 Studios, Deepwater Wind. Both of them had no economic development studies to support them. The Economic Development Corporation rubber-stamped both of those projects. Deepwater Wind will mean at least $500 million more of ratepayers' monies just to get that project going. Last week they were in the news again. They're asking for a waiver of $700,000 for the fee to have Coastal Resources Management Council oversee it. A, should that waiver be given? And secondly, the fact that they're even asking to have the $700,000 waived, should that entire project be reviewed again to see even if they have the deep pockets to go forward with this?
Excellent questions. No silver bullets, right, with economic development. And I think what we learned with 38 Studios, and maybe you're suggesting with this, is stop the shortcuts and stop the special deals. That's not a way to get to economic development. That's a way to waste taxpayer dollars. This is way outside. Treasury has nothing to do with Deepwater Wind, so I can't tell you.
It was touted as an economic development.
No, I appreciate that.
Without any report.
I think you're right. I think it should be looked at again. I think we can't look at this stuff enough. If there's as much taxpayer money on the line as you say, we absolutely should look at it. Because the question is this the best way to spend our money to create jobs? And I think it's it's that kind of analysis and process that we have to start doing, because we cannot afford even a single other 38 studios. It's a black eye to the state. It's made us look bad nationally, and we're losing money.
On 38 studios, briefly, because I have another question, but just to remind everyone, you feel that the state should pay back that what could be $100 million bond, correct?
I do,
okay.
yes.
All right. I want to talk to you about Engaged RI. You know, it's kind of cloudy to me what your involvement in the beginning of that group was. And to remind everyone, it's a group of people that raised about $1 million to support the pension reform law. Did you help create it? Did you pick up the phone to, you know, to help organize that that group? What was your involvement in that?
I was quite involved. I encouraged, you know, the creation of Engage. So for the viewers, you know, Engage was an advocacy group to advocate for pension reform. And what they tried to do was educate people and balance the playing field. You know, labor unions had a well-oiled machine to get their voice out there, which is a good thing. That's democracy. And Engage was trying to put the other side out there. So a lot of people at the time were coming to me saying, Treasurer, what can I do? And I said, you ought to get your voice heard.
But we know who's involved with the labor groups. We don't know who's putting money into Engage RI. They're less than transparent about that.
It is true, and it's
nice.
Unfortunate, and I've been critical of them for not
a little late,
being
though.
transparent.
Early on, you were, to me, it seemed like you were on the fence about speaking out about whether they should be transparent.
No.
And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I would say you are wrong.
Okay.
I have said consistently that all of these groups should disclose. You know, as I am obsessed with disclosure. You know, every dollar I raise is public. I have a transparency portal for my office, which is online. I put the first investor relations transparency portal online for Treasury. So I am committed to transparency, and I wish Engage disclosed. And I've called on them privately and publicly to disclose. So on disclosure, I'm clear. There's no place for doing that. But in terms of, you know, I have recommended people to them. I talked to people on their behalf. I recommended board members. I think what they did, except for disclosure, was a great thing for the people of Rhode Island.
But their argument was retaliation,
right?
And we saw that with Crossroads,
right.
et cetera. So they said, hey, our businesses will go down the tubes. That's why we don't want to disclose the contributors. No merit to that argument?
Yeah, no, there is merit to that argument. I mean, look, it's a fair point. So what Arlene's referencing is that one of the board members of Engage was Ann Nolan, who runs a big homeless organization, and the unions were pretty brutal to her, you know, and so they retaliated against a woman that runs a homeless shelter. Dan Sullivan, who's CEO of Colette, employs hundreds of people in Rhode Island. The teachers union pulled their business from him. So you can see why they would want to not disclose, because this is hard. Having said that, look, I think what's wrong with politics in America is this big money that isn't transparent. So I can see both sides, but at the end of it, I think they should have disclosed.
A short one and a long one for you. Short one, Deborah Gist's contract expires June 30th. Do you think she should be kept on?
I think she's done an excellent job, and she has been a reformer. So I don't know all the details of her contract, this, that, and the other, so I'm going to punt a little bit on that.
But you're supportive of her work? You think she's done a good job?
Yes, yeah.
Longer one, the House seems pretty cool to your push to ban payday loans in Rhode Island. Speaker Murphy is lobbying. Speaker Fox said, quote, for folks that have nowhere else to go, it might be a valid tool for them to go to and not be driven to more onerous kinds of lending, including internet lending at higher interest rates or backroom lending, which is even worse. What's your response to that argument?
In about a minute, if you could.
Okay, spend some time with people who take out payday loans. It's a horrible thing. It ruins lives. It ruins families. It pushes people into bankruptcy, and there are alternatives.
You don't see it as a valid financial tool?
Absolutely not, no. It is designed to be predatory and take advantage of people. It is they advertise it's 10%, 15%. In the fine print, that's every 2 weeks. It's designed to trap people in a cycle of 6 or 7 loans, each at 200+% interest. There's no place for it in this state. It weakens our economy.
A rare prop on Newsmakers, but I understand that you are now hawking Girl
Tim.
Scout cookies. You want to explain yourself on that?
I appreciate that, and also I've worn green today. I have the great pleasure this year of being the honorary cookie chair. So I am going to shamelessly bring out this prop and offer to all of you some Girl Scout cookies. You're going to be inside with the snow today, so I hope everybody stays home and has a lot of cookies.
This is part of also your financial literacy push.
It is.
In 30 seconds, if you could explain that.
Yeah, you know, I'm working with the Girl Scouts around financial literacy, so these girls can become financially secure and confident and know they can be anything they want to be.
Were you a Girl Scout?
I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout. And I'm a mom, and I want my daughter to be financially secure.
What is your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
Thin Mint, hands down.
Ooh,
that's a
are going to be
political.
tough now with that.
Political
interest
no-no.
group.
Kiss that campaign goodbye. Everyone knows it's shortbread. I mean, our guest this week is
be
General.
safe in the storm, everyone.
Absolutely, and a lot of people are watching it, probably digging out now as it's on a Sunday. We hope you got through it just fine. Our guest this week is General Treasurer Gina Raimondo. We have her State of the Treasury on our website. It's under the on-air section. Just click on Newsmakers. That's WPRI.com. For Arlene Violet and Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.
Good show.